Welcome back to Murder with Friends. Today we're talking about Jeffrey Dahmer, and where you're picking up with us, Jeffrey Dahmer has just completed his first kill and he's gotten away with it. His parents are none the wiser, but what they do think is that he's a drunkard and that he needs to get his life together. So let's pick up with Jeffrey Dahmer. He just flunked out of Ohio State University. What do his family think that he needs to do?
Well, so young Jeffrey through high school was an alcoholic. I mean, he took to drinking at a very young age. If you read anything about Dahmer or actually speak to people who knew him through interviews, etc., they will tell you all he did was drink. He couldn't keep a job. So what are you gonna do? Ship him off to the army. So he goes to San Antonio. He's discharged, and we'll get into that as well. But he's pretty much on the outs. I mean, he's an alcoholic.
So he was discharged for drunk and disorderly behavior. And then what's interesting is later, following Dahmer's arrest, 2 soldiers would come forward and allege that he had raped them while he was serving with them. And he was discharged in 1981 due to his abuse, but he couldn't face his family because for a while, they sort of thought that maybe he had his act together because he didn't begin, he was always an alcoholic, but he sort of got it under control for a little bit in the army. And then he really fell off the wagon. So when he was discharged, he went to Miami just because he didn't want to face his family.
And alcoholism reared its ugly head in Miami as well. He ended up living on the beach. It took an incident where a rat was on his body as he slept on the beach for him to call his dad and be like, "Hey, I need to get it together." Now his dad didn't offer to send him money, but said, "Hey, Jeffrey, we will pay for you to come home. There's no need to stay in Miami." So he moves back to West Allis with his grandmother.
Yeah, so he first says you can return to Ohio, but shortly thereafter they're like, all right, go stay with your grandmother. We're again seeing that his family is, his dad, you sense this love for him, but also they don't want to enable him that much more than they already have. They don't understand why he just can't get his act together. And it does bring to mind again this secret that he's harboring of his homosexual urges and feelings tied with that violent urge, and he feels like he can't speak it out to anyone. And his addiction to alcohol is out of control, but up until this point, he hasn't killed anyone until there is a library incident that really sort of awakens his demons. Can you talk about that?
Absolutely. Well, there had been a 6-year span from 78 after graduating high school to 1984 when his next killing happened. He was in a library. He was another library goer, frequenter, had passed him a note wanting him to engage in sexual favors.
And just really quickly, is that a thing in the gay men community? I had never heard. I would not go to the library to pick up people. Do people do that? I don't know.
Think so. While we're looking at microfiche, let's just.
So I'm wondering, is this sort of a chance, an unfortunate chance encounter where this guy had no idea? He's like, oh, you're kind of a cutie, and here's a note. I mean.
Well, yeah. I mean, sure. I mean, it could. I mean, who's to say? Nowadays we have cell phones. We send Snapchat.
They didn't have Tinder. You go to the library.
But that was something that awakened the demon that was inside of Jeffrey that had lied dormant. And here's another misconception about Jeffrey Dahmer that people gloss over is that he had a great personality. Jeffrey Dahmer was very charming person, and he was extremely good looking.
Yeah, he was quirky, but he was good looking, he was charming. And so following this note, he brings a mannequin home and he starts sort of messing around with mannequins. And he starts to explore the gay scene in Milwaukee, which I didn't know existed. But it does.
There's an Eagle bar in every city, Grace.
Sure. So now we pick up in November 1987, and again, Jeffrey Dahmer's drinking is absolutely out of control, and he wakes up after a heavy night of drinking next to the dead body of Stephen Tuomi in the Ambassador Hotel. Now he knows that Stephen is dead because he's bleeding from the mouth, but he doesn't remember to this day. We have no idea how specifically he was killed. He packs Tuomi into a large suitcase and heads down to his grandmother's house and then dismembers the body. So this is his first sort of, he didn't turn himself in, and he was probably shaken up by waking up next to this body, but to him it was just like, all right, it seems like, here we go, I guess this is who I am inside.
Right, you hit the nail on the head. That was the first murder in 1978 was like, wow, was this youthful exuberance of something that just happened. But with Steve Tuomi, it was like the door had opened. It was everything he had thought in the last 15 years finally came to fruition internally about his sexual urges. And the reason why he started off with a mannequin was because, again, it went back to control. A mannequin is this inanimate object. It can't walk away. It doesn't talk back. It just does what you tell it to do. And that's what he wanted. It was about control with Jeffrey.
And then this is the first time that we also see him begin to really take and preserve trophies. So he preserved the head of Stephen for weeks. And from that point, he now fully commits to these murderous desires while he's still living at his grandmother's house. But soon we will see that he moves out. And this is the pattern of drugging people, strangling people. But first he has to sort of seduce them, to solicit them, saying that I'll take your photo. Or
offers them money.
Offers them money to hang out with him. And then he'll put something like a prescription pill in their drink. And then he'll strangle them. But to this point, he has not taken a knife. He moves out of his grandmother's place in 1988. But shortly thereafter, he is convicted of a second-degree sexual assault. He serves a year in jail. He says that the boy that he assaulted, he didn't know was underage at the time. It doesn't really matter. We're just already seeing this sexually violent, deviant behavior, and he just served a year for that. And then
he got
he's
a
out.
year, and then yeah, absolutely, he got a year in jail, which. A year in jail is enough to get people straight and together. I mean, am I wrong in that? Like, I think if I went to jail for a year, I would be scared straight. He's also given 5 years probation, and they're like, hey, get a job, get on the straight path. It's cool. The father wrote a letter to the judge asking that he not be released, because the father, I feel like Lionel Dahmer knew, he had to have known that something was not right with Jeffrey. And also, Lionel Dahmer felt a little guilty about possibly passing on something genetically to Jeffrey, because he, at an early age, Lionel had thoughts of murder with fire and things of that nature. So also, Lionel taught Jeffrey how to extrapolate flesh from bone, how to boil the bones, what solutions to use. So
because this is all part of the pattern, and how he disposes of the bodies so that they become this black sludge, and it's untraceable, and you can pour it down the drain.
I liken Jeffrey used muriatic acid and a solution called Soilex. So I liken that to ribs on a bone, the ribs that are done well. I know this is gonna be really, don't go to Chili's after this.
You're bringing up ribs on our Jeffrey Dahmer episode?
Yes, because.
You monster.
I'm a monster, but if you've ever had a really good rack of ribs, the meat is spongy, it just falls off the bone. That's when he boiled it using the solution. That was the end result for the flesh.
Yeah, well, that actually is a very good analogy. But after he gets out of jail, he may be trying to get back on the straight and narrow, really not exactly the case. He rents an apartment on the west side, that's Oxford apartment 213. The Oxford apartment, it becomes known the murder factory. I mean, this is, if you know anything about true crime, serial killers, it's the Oxford apartment complex.
Well, the reason why he is at the Oxford apartment is because the grandmother Jeffrey has been living with the grandmother, and there's these smells wafting from the basement.
Yeah, she kicks him out.
Yeah, she sees this array of men that Jeffrey's bringing home and finds the mannequin. So there's all these things that, she's a very religious woman. So everything Jeffrey's doing is not in alignment with her faith. And coupled with this smell that is just undeniable, so Jeffrey is told, get the hell out.
Yeah, so he does, he gets the hell out, and now his cooling off period shortens, and he begins taking more trophies. And now we're gonna talk about a little bit of the cannibalism, but first let's take a look at this clip.
Dahmer took it one horrifying step further with Ernest Miller.
He related this was a person he really liked. He indicated that he had filleted his heart and kept it in the freezer, and he also kept his bicep. He stated that it tasted like beef for a filet mignon. He ate only the people that he really liked, and he wanted them to be a part of him or with him all the time.
And when we come back in part 3, we're gonna talk about how he was finally arrested, and we're gonna talk about the aftermath of one of the most notorious and deadly serial killers in American history.